Looks like they're bringing in the harvest. It's middle of the summer of the hay. In Ontario, they'll probably do that again one more time before winter. It's an honest thing. Which leads me to today's video on the second part of what I was describing to you I was going to do in regard to the what would happen with Trump in regard to the American dollar, and what actually got my juices stirring on this was the fiasco that's just happened in Paris with the opening ceremonies. But this may be a little longer video, but I'll try and put it in such a way that when I'm finished, it all makes sense. I don't script these things, so it's just kind of like what comes out of my head. So yeah, here we go. So if you looked at some of my US dollar videos, and this in conjunction with the upcoming Trump election, America is existing on something that I call unearned privilege. Now, what does unearned privilege mean? I'm going to extrapolate that on society, and I'll bring it back to America. So unearned privilege is something that is fairly rampant in Western society. You see it in the massive amount of credit card debt. You see it in the incredible robustness of the beauty industry for men and for women. You see it in the overall loan infrastructure of corporate and private citizens, which ties into the credit card thing. But at the end of the day, the problem with unearned privilege is there comes a point when that privilege is taken away, and because you haven't earned it, it hurts way more than if it was a privilege that was removed that you actually deserved. So here's what I mean by that. Many beautiful women, and this might be more prevalent with women, although you see it with men with some procedures. Many beautiful women, when they're young, they enjoy the privilege that is given to them simply by the fact that they're young and beautiful. A lot of 18 to 29-year-old girls, they're enamored with the fact that everyone pays them attention, buys them things, does things for them, because it's widely known. The difference between men and women is that, if you want to do it in monetary terms, women get born with $20 million in the bank, and men start with zero. And as the years go by, we come into our adult years, there is a point at which these cross. Men's value starts to continue to increase, and women's goes down, at least as it pertains to youth, fertility, and beauty in their minds. Again, much of this stuff is self-inflicted. I'm not telling you this is my opinion, but the reason the beauty industry is so robust is that women feel that they're going bankrupt and they have to shore up whatever assets they have. And so that's why you see an explosion in things like the Botox injections, the cosmetic industry in general, whether it's fake eyelashes, fake undergarments, etc., or on the more extreme, the extensive surgical procedures. And of course, men indulge in this as well, but statistically not to as great a degree, simply because the value of men's currency is very rarely measured just in how they look. And sadly, and I feel bad for women who feel that their value is tied up solely in how they look, but that's the society we live in. And you see that now, especially if you're familiar with what the Ozempic craze that's going on in Hollywood, where now you can just take a pill, and you don't even have to go to the gym where you earn your fitness. You can just take a pill and you lose the weight. But the other side of these things is that it's widely known now that if you're addicted to Botox, after a few years of doing that, your face will stop functioning as far as showing expression. Essentially, you burn out the nerve endings in your face because it's unnatural. Everybody knows the horror story, the plastic surgery horror stories that exist in Hollywood, where we look at some Hollywood types and we wonder what happened to the woman that we used to know. Think of Meg Ryan, Renee Zellweger, and a few of the others. It's actually fairly obvious who's had a lot of work, and this goes from mild to wild because you see a lot of them with some really extensive procedures. And I stress extensive procedures because it's one thing to I don't know, do a mild renovation. It's quite another to totally redo the house. But imagine you're totally going to redo the house, but you can't do anything with the leaking foundation, which is what age is, and that's why a lot of these cosmetic procedures in later life they end up looking like monsters. And now with the Ozempic craze going, there's a phenomenon going on right now called Ozempic face, which is essentially the people who are on this Ozempic after a period of time, they start to look like walking ghouls where their skin is simply hanging on their face, and they need more procedures. And so all of the privilege that they would have gotten from the initial surgery, and I'm sure they did, there's lots of people who are very happy when they have the initial surgery. A decade or two later, they've actually taken away all of that privilege or all of that benefit, and they actually look far less than they would have looked if they just remained natural. A good example of this, and I've said this to friends in the past, is I'm a big fan of Betty White. It was clear that Betty White has left the world now, but she died when she's like 99 or something. And Betty White was a starlet in Hollywood who in her youth was quite beautiful and very vibrant, etc., etc. But all through the years, it was pretty obvious that she never got any procedures. But I declare, even in her 80s and 90s, I, as a man, found her very attractive just by virtue of the fact of her attitude and her zeal and just a kind of energy that is far greater than just the perceived beauty of a woman. And quite frankly, I found her beautiful as a woman for her feminine wiles. So yeah, that is the cost of when in regard to the beauty, or for example, the credit card. Got crushing credit card debt right now, where let's put dinner on the card for the 100th time, let's buy that new outfit for the 100th time, and interestingly enough, we forget to pay the bill, and you have a lot of people right now who are in some pretty serious situations, especially in light of the fact of the rising interest rates. And that's going to become even more dire. And the other part of unearned privilege is that you have a whole group of people who actually, even though the privilege is unearned, whether it's their beauty or their possessions or their money, they feel like somehow they were entitled to it. It's the Western entitlement. And when that is ultimately removed, that is going to make it, well, excruciating for them. So now let's look at the American dollar situation that I posed to you earlier. Now, America went off the gold standard in 1971, and what that essentially means is that up until 71, you could exchange for every American dollar, you could exchange an equivalent amount of gold, which at that time was priced, I believe, it was either $25 or $32, I forget, but the point is it's right in that range. And the reason they closed the gold window is that to finance the Vietnam War, they quite frankly were running out of money, running out of gold. And so the only thing that keeps currency in check, or inflation in check, is what everyone else is willing to give you for your money. Now at that time there was an agreement which is called Bretton Woods, which essentially the whole world agreed that they were going to use the American dollar for exchanges, currency swaps, oil especially, but generally all transactions were going to be funneled through the American system. And America would get a cut, and because they were America, they theoretically won the Second World War. They were this great shining light that theoretically deserved all this privilege. So when this happened in 71, almost immediately inflation took off. The inflation we're experiencing now is a shadow of what the inflation was then. Because, for example, a median family home in America was about $10,000 in 71. And by 1981, that same family home was $110,000. And as well, the price of gold had gone from $32 all the way up to $800. Now, what caused that cycle to stop is that through a series of Herculean interventions, interest rates were raised in America to the point, you can talk to your grandfather about this, I can remember it as a child, but interest rates were raised to 20% because the world believed, and I'm saying the interest rates, that's if people want to loan you money, how much you're going to pay them back for that privilege. And so interest rates peaked at 20% because America had to continually raise them to convince the rest of the world that they needed to trust the fact that their money was still worth something, even though it wasn't backed by the American or by the gold. And it worked. By 81, it worked. America still had a very large manufacturing base. They still were widely regarded throughout the world as being a stable country, the most stable country, the most free country, all that kind of stuff. And it worked. And so interest rates actually peaked in 81 at about 20%, and all the way since then, they have been on a downward trajectory. Which again, if you look at my US dollar video, they basically were on a decline up until what we saw just before COVID, when interest rates bottomed out just above 0%. But what happened in that time? You see, in that time, America still got to take advantage of those exchanges over time of transactions through the world. And that money would just show up just because. America continued to make products, but slowly over a period of time, America started to eat itself. And what I mean by that is you saw free trade agreements pop up. You saw situations where you had arbitrage where, manufacturers saw abilities to make things in other countries to take advantage of the strength of the American dollar, having things made cheaply in other nations and brought here and sold and making lots of profit in the difference. But of course, the expense of that is the average American person who, essentially we've seen an erosion of jobs since that time like clockwork. It's the closing and the minimization of the American workforce really has created what we're in today, which is just simply a service economy. We essentially almost make nothing in North America, Canada included. If America sneezes, we get a cold. So, and that of course would not be unlike the woman or the man who, looks in the mirror and goes, oh, if I just get a little Botox, which is completely unnatural, these wrinkles will go away and I'll look good. And in regard to America, there's like, oh, if we just manufacture this stuff in another place, we can make all the money and everyone will be happy who gets it. We won't bother worrying about the health of the workers, and in the case of the person getting the Botox, we won't bother worrying about the health of our skin and nerve cells in the area we're injecting. So, here we are now this is all done in very predictable cycles. So if you watch the Trump speech at his acceptance speech of the Republican nomination, as I already mentioned, they're treating this guy like Jesus. Lots of accolades and big prayers, and Trump's going to change everything. But you must understand, this is all theater from the perspective that Trump really can't do anything. He can make lots of promises. And so when he said things like, oh, he's going to lower the interest rates and he's going to bring the jobs back, and they're nice words, they really are. But the inherent problem with that is that, you see, all of the infrastructure to make, let's say, a car, okay? All of the infrastructure to make a car, it's very true, we can assemble them here. But do you remember back in COVID when all of a sudden we had the circuit board shortage? And we had cars and trucks sitting on lots for months because they couldn't get the electronic circuitry to bring them in. That's because we don't make it in America. And it's not something you can just set up like that. And so manufacturing is not something you can just all of a sudden say, ta-da! Because, you need people you need manufacturers who are making things like rubber, different plastics, grommets, transistors, all that kind of stuff. And all of that manufacturing has essentially left America. It is now all overseas. And so, yes, it will be valiant to say we can bring a manufacturing back, but that it will just be a figurehead statement. So what's Trump likely going to do? Well, Trump is what's known as the bankruptcy king. One of the ways he saved a lot of his businesses in the past is by bringing them in through periods of bankruptcy. And I believe Trump is going to sacrifice the American dollar, much in line with what I showed you in my video, where I believe American dollar is going to go to 60 cents Canadian. And the timelines are all in that video. Look through my catalog, blah, blah, blah. Because here's how it's going to work. Trump's going to get in, and rah-rah, yay team, it's going to be all wonderful. And he's going to make some promises, and there'll be some figurehead, maybe he'll have a big thing where he stops payments to the Ukraine or something like that, or there's going to be a big thing where all of a sudden he's going to send a check to all the American people, just as a congratulations that he's in office. And then very likely he's going to lower interest rates further than they are now. As I told you, the chart is going to, the chart does allow for interest rates. They don't go linearly up and they don't go linearly down. They go, So it's like a, so what's going to happen is that Trump is going to come in. He is going to lower interest rates, but the only way you can lower interest rates, because you must understand, interest rates are related directly to the Treasury market. And the Treasury market pegs interest rates so that people can decide if they're going to loan America money based on how much interest they're going to get. If they're not going to be paid a decent level of interest, then they're not going to loan America money, in which case America is going to loan itself money through the Federal Reserve, aka printing money. So what is going to happen is America is going to they're going to lower interest rates. They won't necessarily go to zero. They'll probably go down to, as I mentioned, probably back down to about, like the Treasury rates right now are, I have to look at a chart, but I think they're like four and a bit. They're going to go down to like 3 and change, maybe just a hair below 3, but not much, because that'll be like a super, what's perceived as super stimulus. But it will be America actually fully inflating the debt. You see, there's a $35 trillion liability now. And in the final watch, they're going to, could they double it? It's simply a matter of a keystroke. But the best part is that they'll be able to blame, because we had all of the perceived incompetence of the previous government. If you know one thing about Trump's mindset, he oftentimes will, if you look at a person's history, it reveals the future. And what will happen is he will look for a scapegoat. This is a narcissistic ploy. They look for a scapegoat. They look for someone to blame for their hardship. And so Trump will very easily, and the American public will go, oh yeah. He will blame very easily the incompetent Biden administration, completely dismissing the fact that the America bringing up debt has been the order of the day since 1971. Every president's done it. Bill Clinton had a minor reversal, but it was a blip on the radar. And you're going to see mass inflation take off in the United States. So basically, Trump will lower the rates. He's going to institute what's called price controls. He's heard that in his speech as well, where he will limit how much grain, oil, and all that kind of stuff can be sold for. However, anytime price controls have been instituted in the history of the world, whether it's Russia, Venezuela, or any other mostly communist regimes, there's a scarcity that occurs. There's a scarcity that occurs because if resources can be sold beyond the borders for more than they can be sold inside the borders, that becomes the issue. And so this is going to seem all nice and rosy into the winter of 2025 as Trump gets in the 2024. And but as these price controls come in, it's very late. I'm not sure how fast this is going to happen. This could extend for a whole year, because it's not going to be like a sudden collapse. It's going to be a very accelerated collapse, but it's not going to just like snap overnight. and you will see price controls, shortages, and you will see the American dollar's value against every other currency in the world begin to decline. Further to that, as Trump has made it clear that he's going to strong-arm China, etc., well, shit, I got a newsflash for you. The BRICS countries are all online to get, to become westernized, if you will. Like, everybody gets a fridge and a stove and a nice life like we've got. And the threats of America will not matter. The unearned privilege of America will not matter. I often hearken this to, imagine, if you will, for a moment, that this period between 1971 and now has been like high school. You started in grade 9, and there was the cool guy who was also a bit of a bully. Everybody accoladed him, but if he didn't like what you did, him and his buddies got together and they'd rough you up, maybe throw you against the locker, something like that. And you know, you go through high school and there would be certain people who really liked being on your side, but there's certain people who just respected you, just sort of kept their distance, and there's some people that just plumb didn't like you. But the inherent problem we have right now is that graduation has happened, and that bully has gone back to the school, and the halls are empty. It's summer vacation. The halls are empty. There's no one to push around. There's no one to do his thing. Further, that school's about to start again, and it's going to have a whole bunch of new kids that he's too old for. It's like you're like the old kid who goes back to high school, and everybody says, "Oh yeah, you're so-and-so's brother, aren't you?" And he feels completely like a fish out of water. And so we're in a situation where, you know, I can remember when I was a kid going to high school, you'd see some kid, some older kid you didn't know, and it was so-and-so's brother, and maybe they hung out for the day, reliving their high school experience. But the reality is that they didn't stay long, and if they did, it was weird. Eventually they left. And that ultimately is what's going to happen with America. We're going to come into a situation now where, as I said, you're going to see the dollar. The dollar's not going away. It's still, the infrastructure throughout the world where the American dollar is accepted is extremely robust. And the dollar will still continue to be accepted all over the world. However, the value of it is going to be decimated. Proof of this, watch the news. They keep talking about how the Canadian dollar is going to crash. But it's always the opposite. And I've showed you my charts before. The dollar index and the Canadian American dollar pair, they're hanging on a cliff right now. And I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Looks like it's going to crash. Now, unfortunately, if our Canadian dollar rises against the American dollar in that fashion, they won't buy as much stuff from us here. So it's going to be a little dicier here. So we will be looking to, export more grain to other areas and some of our natural resources, things like that. So it's going to be an interesting time. And make no mistake, I'm not saying these things to make you worry. I'm saying these things so you're just not surprised. What could a person do about this kind of thing? If you had privilege, let's pretend you had privy to the knowledge of what COVID was going to do to real estate prices just before. Would you have gone out and bought 2 or 3 houses? Probably not. You probably would have been scared shitless to do that. And the rise that's happened, great. But because the American dollar works with the Canadian dollar, it is going to drop against the value of the Canadian dollar, but the Canadian dollar is also going to drop against the value of other currencies in the world. So this is basically a growing pain. It is ultimately going to bring more manufacturing back longer term to us because we will be an economical place to get things built. But that's bigger picture. But there's going to be a lot of pain in the Trump presidency, again, associated with the plans he's going to do. He's going to sacrifice the power of the American dollar. I don't believe there's going to be a war because we have an economic war going right now. And as I mentioned in the last video about how we're at war with China, China has beaten us. They have beaten us because if they stopped selling to us tomorrow, we'd be dead in the water. We wouldn't be able to build computers, we wouldn't be able to build cars, we wouldn't be able to build furniture, we wouldn't be able to build tractors. We wouldn't be able to build anything because the lion's share of components, except maybe some of the heavy stuff like axles and things like that, and engines, comes out of China. So they have beaten us. Are they going to show up on our shores? Well, no, because the Chinese people aren't, they're having their own issues with their government, and this is a macroeconomic thing. And the big thing that I'm going to cover in future videos is that this is all planned and orchestrated. The guys upstairs are just pulling the strings. It's almost as if it's a game to them. I know you may not necessarily believe that, but it really is a game, and you can see that in some of the forecasts from the past that are so coincidental, like the Simpsons forecast, the heavy metal comic book that I mentioned to you in past, and some of the other things just related to the way America's moving. And that's because at the end, it was founded by Freemasons. All the symbolism in Washington is done by Freemasons. One nation under God doesn't mean Jehovah. No, it's the other guy, the guy who got kicked out of heaven. But we'll talk about that in another video. So I'll leave you, for ending the thoughts about this video, I would more or less say, always be aware of unearned privilege. If you're thinking about getting Botox, well, you will get a little benefit. You'll get it, and all your girlfriends will go, oh, you look so good, blah, 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 nice. You might get a couple more dates. Heck, you might even get a decent fellow who will be in love with who you think you look like. Guys, maybe the guys are going to go and get, I don't know, muscle implants, or you're going to run up their credit card. You're going to get a super expensive car and run up the credit card and make your lifestyle look really fantastic. Maybe that's what you're going to do. Maybe you're going to indulge in some of that unearned privilege. And the point is that when it's unearned, though, because of these things that are coming, your health is something you can't trade on. It's there or not. And your genetics are not something you can trade on. And all these things that happen with America, it's simply been engineering they've been in right place, right time. It's not like they earned anything. I mean, for heaven's sakes, they're constantly making war. Currently the population is morally bankrupt, and we can talk about that some more if you like. And it's not everybody. I mean, there's always factions. It's fine. But the one thing I'll leave you with is that the Bible says, "Be ye not afraid." And so if you look in the past and see that God has guided your steps, that's great. But at the same time, having a knowledge, like in the Bible when there's famine, I think that Jacob and his family went to Egypt because they knew they had grain. Be cognizantly aware, be paying attention. Don't be putting yourself in harm's way. Don't be overextending yourself based upon promises of some billionaire who's going to show up. If you're really in tune with what's going on, everybody who's really self-aware has this feeling like we're all waiting for the other shoe to drop. And if you recall how quickly and unexpected the COVID thing opened up and became so serious, right from out of the blue, these things I'm talking to you about are right on schedule. The unknown thing, of course, is that there could be a black swan event which super accelerates this. I have no idea what this black swan event could be. Yellowstone just had a very major eruption. There could be some kind of uber terrorist event. I have no idea. You certainly don't have to worry about nuclear war, and that's something I can cover on another day. But the point is that these are things that are there. And so, sit with yourself, surround yourself with good quality people who are smart. Not people who get offended if you've got an idea not better, but different than them. Not people that want to force their agenda on you because they know best, or force medical procedures on you because they know best. People who will have a conversation with you that is where you can share your opinion, they can share yours, and through fact-finding deliberation, you can come to logical conclusions which may put you on the same side, but at least maybe will keep you civil. Because that's, at the end of the day, everything I've just shared with you today is, at the end of the day, my opinion. It is not investment advice, There are things you can do. You can go on to YouTube and type in, how do I protect my purchasing power, and things like that. There's things you can buy, there's places you can put your money, all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to elaborate that in a big way. I have covered price movements of things that are coming in the future, but I'm not going to elaborate on that now. But I'm just going to give you this video is just a philosophical trip into what is the cost and what is the ramifications when you embrace unearned privilege.